But the advances are made.
Yes and no. I mean, I think there's a way that you can twist that advance, you know? If someone does, you know, kind of do a little, or whatever it might be, there's a way that you can play with that it doesn't come to that kind of eeriness of you not wanting to. I don't really know how to.
Maia Von Lekow, apart from the musicianship, are there interests that have a social responsibility from your part, or are you so preoccupied with your own career that that's it?
No, not at all. I think it's just trying to establish yourself first. First of all, myself as a person, as an individual. Where do I want to go with what I'm doing? You know, how am I comfortable with what I'm doing for me to be able to teach other people, for me to be able to share with other people?
So you're not there yet? You're not to the point where you're running master classes on a Sunday for 12-year-olds, going into kindergartens to teach people? You're not doing any of that?
No, I'm not doing that in the sense that, you know, like I did a really interesting music consultation 2 years ago with UNHCR and Film Aid in Dadaab refugee camp. And that was where we were working with kids. There was some finances that had come in from Japan. And we were working with kids there, like a music competition. I don't want to say a pop idol, but it was something similar. You know, just in terms of having these musical people come together, writing the songs, being able to perform the songs, and then the winners come to Nairobi and we do workshops, we meet other Kenyan musicians, you know, things like that. And that was really interesting, and I really enjoyed playing a role in, you know, in terms of sharing what I can. And you know, in terms of teaching and stuff, I wasn't taught, so I don't really know how to. Someone says, you know, can you teach me how to sing? Well, we can choose a song and we can go through that song, but I don't necessarily know how to be like, yeah, you know.
You weren't taught, so the performance skills relating to a public, you go out there and all of a sudden there's so many thousands of people, and then they say, on stage, big hand for Maia Von Lekow. Do you see yourself as a consummate worker up of an audience, or is there a learning curve there?
Oh, definite learning curve. Definite. I mean, I can say that when I was in nursery school, I'll tell you a little story. When I was in nursery school, I used to get up on stage and I had to go ba black sheep, and I would just, excuse my English, but just pee in my pants, you know? Like, and of course, I mean, I had stage fright for a really long time. And it does take time. But now I think it's just become so easy, and I've just been doing it so much. That, of course, you always have butterflies. But it's a learning curve.
Are there tricks of the trade? You sort of learn, you know, 2 words of Swahili to say I love you in Swahili and Japanese.
And when you go to Poland, you know, you say whatever, thank you in Polish. Of course. And I think, I don't know. I think for me, it's just having to be able to describe your songs and describe your music and feel comfortable with that and share that experience. Whereas I'm like, okay, next song, you know? So and I think you'll constantly always be growing. I mean, I don't think it ever stops.
Okay, so one last prong about this idea of creativity. You're talking about your songwriting. Now, there's a big debate that rages when I sit sort of listening to musicians and say, oh, Maia Von Lekow, she is not Kenyan, she has sold out to the Western whatever, she's lost her roots. Are you part of that? Does it influence what you do, or you don't care really?
Big time.
You do care?
I care. I care too much, actually. And, you know, people tell me, who cares? Like, forget about it.
What is the voice that you're trying to find?
You know, I think where I'm coming from is a background where, okay, obviously there's, you know, my mom's half German, half Italian, my dad's Kenyan Arabic. And my father left when I was very young. So I grew up with my mom, and I came from I mean, she was a travel agent and she was a very hard worker. And I came from a safe, you know, privileged upbringing. From that aspect, I think I just hadn't really, what's the word that I'm looking for? There was a slight lapse in terms of my surroundings, in terms of knowing what's out the fence, you know, what's outside.
You're protected.
And projecting. And of course, like, you know, always listening to jazz music. I wasn't really listening to a lot of Kenyan music, a lot of African music at that point. And that only came later. So I think I was having, and I still do, I still have to I have a bit of an identity crisis, you know, in terms of, I'm 0.5, I live in Kenya, I spent many years abroad. How do I now, you know, incorporate those 2 things? And yes, I speak Swahili, but I don't speak Swahili that well. I need to learn Swahili, and that's one of my missions. You know, but so I sing in Swahili some songs. But it's just finding that niche you know, am I Kenyan enough?
Right.
People tell me that I'm not Kenyan, but when I go somewhere else, they're like, well, you're not, you know, so you're always kind of stuck in the middle.
Right.
And I think this comes to a lot of people who, you know, who've also been living abroad, who come back.
Right.
They don't feel like they're from there, they don't feel like they're from here.
Right.
You know, do you know what I mean? It's trying to find that spot.
Right.
But then again, is that I was spending so much energy worrying about this situation that then, you know, I listen to people like Asha and Ayo and Neka, and all those guys are in the same situation.
Right.
And they don't care. They're just singing music to sing music.
Right.
So I think it's really important, and I'm going to say that to other musicians out there, like, it's really important not to care so much about what other people think.
Right.
I think that's a real downfall that we have. And of course, you're insecure, and your fans are the ones who, you know, who you get your energy from.
Right.
But I think it can also be very dangerous.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd like to draw you now, again, as a young Kenyan, forget them, this whole idea of brand Kenya, Vision 2030. And do you see yourself in that brand?
Yes.
And the vision?
Yes, I think so. I think in a small way I do. You know, playing a small part, whatever it may be.
Yes.
I do.
But do you see yourself as being included in that brand? Because you've just said, you described yourself as being a 0.5,
Yeah.
meaning that you're of mixed parentage.
Yeah.
And you are who you are.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the Kenya that, because you have the Kenya of the ethnic groups, the tribes, the Kenya of the minorities, the Wazungu, the Wahindi. You have the Kenya. Your social life. Do you see yourself in a comfortable national environment where anywhere in this country you travel and you say, "This is my country," and everything is fine?
I definitely think so. I do. I mean, I'm saying this after just saying, you know, in between, but I.
So how do you describe the events? How do you event the PEV? How do you the post-election violence? How do you explain all that in your master plan? Is it because you come from a privileged society and this only affected the poor?
Not at all. I think it affected everybody. And at that time, talking about, you know, the other job, the hotel management, I was actually, during the 2007, I was working at a hotel in Diani.
Right.
And, you know, yeah, for me it was difficult. You're working with tourists, you're working with people who are coming to see the wonderful Kenya, to come to see the beach. And you have people who've been suffering, including myself, including people around, including the staff who are working at the hotel, whose families now have just been killed, and they have to come to work and, you know, serve people, tourists who are there, who have absolutely no idea, totally oblivious to what's going on just outside the fence. So I think of course it affects everybody. It does. Right. And I do feel very proud of. I'm a Kenyan.
Right.
You know.
So okay, we're going to have elections in March. We're going to be 50. These are big moments. Do they hold any significance, those two events in Maia Von Lekow's life? The elections, any views, counter views on the way things are going as we speak now? I mean, you can't predict the future.
No.
What would you predict?
I don't know if I can predict anything necessarily, but I think I just hope that the elections are going to be peaceful.
Right.
I know that's one of those very vague words, peaceful. What does that mean?
Right.
But I just hope. I mean, you know, you hear two different scopes of the story.
Would you be one of these people that would sort of be planning to be in Uganda or Tanzania? Or,
Not at all.
This is your plan.
Not at all.
There's none of that apprehension or fear.
No. I think I'm going to be here. I'm going to vote. We're going to be here.
Right.
We're going to see what happens. And, you know, I also have a partner who's very into the film world, and he's going to be there on the line. And, you know, no, I think we're going to be here, and we haven't thought about going anywhere at that time.
Right.
I think it's important, you know, if we're going to figure out the way forward of a country,
right,
to be part of it. And,
right.
You know.
Right. So Kenya at 50, this is the very last question. Kenya at 50, you as an artist, as a musician, as a creative person, if you were to suggest the way in which to best celebrate being 50, of which you'd be part, I assume, if I were to arrange it, what would you want to be done?
A fresh young leader.
Right.
No.
In terms of celebrating Kenya at 50 years old, 2013.
In terms of celebrating, you know, I think I think for me what's really important is that there's a lot of Kenyan musicians from the older generation who've been, and this is now talking from a musician's perspective, but who've been forgotten about. A lot of Kenyans don't really remember their elder musicians. And I think that's a really sad part in our history. And I think for one thing, for the 50-year independence is bringing those people back. And having some sort of a collaborative, show of some kind. A mix between the young and the old.
Right. So you're not for old politicians, but you're for old musicians.
Definitely.
Maia Von Lekow, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.